So good morning. Oh, yep, we're live. That's great. Okay, I'm just going to put it out here and say that I don't think we can promise to deliver the same kind of aerodynamic demonstration you got from the last speakers. But I am one of those people, and I suspect you share this view, that words are as powerful as any force on the earth.
Absolutely. I'm a philosopher, so I don't think I have a choice to say that words don't matter. Words matter immensely.
So we're going to use the power of words to discuss what I think is a really important conversation, and that is the conversation around ethics, morality, and AI. The first question I'm going to ask, though, is a really basic one. We live in a time where ethical behavior is not necessarily valued in the way that it once was. It seems to be okay in today's society to say one thing and do another thing, to change your mind, to do all kinds of different behaviors that are at odds with what might be considered typical ethical behavior. So here's my question. Do ethics and morality still matter today? Is that relevant?
So great start. And I think as philosophers, one thing we say is that if anything matters, ethics matters.
Okay.
So we can say nothing matters, the world is just, floating around, we're all gonna die, sure. But like if anything matters, it matters how we treat each other, how we create a society, and how we live. What kind of a life are we putting ourselves into? What kind of a world are we putting ourselves into? So, and this is not just like this aspirational thinking. It's really like when you apply for, you want to get an education, and you apply for a university. Well, are you going to be discriminated against, or are you going to have the option? You want to buy a house, you apply for a loan. Are you going to get a fair chance in getting a house? You want to know whether or not you should get a certain treatment, and you want to look up online. Are you going to get the right information?
Right.
So all of these are ethical questions. It's not about, you feel good and I hope that too, but it's not just about feel good, do good. Yes, but because it matters, because there's a purpose. And I think we universally actually agree that everything that I just mentioned matter.
Okay. So I would certainly agree. I'm a journalist, and the reason I do what I do is because I believe facts matter so people can make decisions about how they want to live their lives and how they want to behave. And as the daughter of a minister, I think that there is such a thing as good and bad. Maybe not black and white, but there are things that are better than worse. Which brings me to this question. Is AI a force for good, or is it a force for bad, or is it simply a tool?
I think, so the quick answer is it's a tool. It's a complicated tool because unlike most other technologies, in the case of AI, we have our values, our trade-offs, value trade-offs, what matters for us, built into the system a lot of the times. So when we create an AI model, we already make a lot of decisions that determines how that model works, what that model aims to. So it's not just like, here's a tool, use it for good or for bad. Here's a tool that may come with good or bad to start with, but even if it is good, you may still use it for good or bad. So there is more opportunities to make it great, or there's more opportunities to really make it extremely detrimental for humanity.
So as developers and, I'm going to call them, I hate this word, but I'm going to use it anyway, ideators, as creators, developers, strategists are creating AI tools, do you think they are actually thinking about the ethical concerns, or is that something that comes later in the process?
In my experience, they do think about it. But there is a gap between thinking and acting. So they think about it because by now, I think most of us, especially those who are in AI, are aware that there are lots of decisions that you have to make as you create the tool. On the other hand, how do you make good decisions? It's not rule of thumb. It's not a little pamphlet that you have to follow. It is really it's almost like math. You have to calculate what is the best course of action in this situation. And you have to do it over and over again as you build the tool. So I don't think they necessarily have the resources, knowledge to do this, or they do, but they don't have the incentives to do this. And that is, I think, very important, because I don't want us to think the problem happens in the developing phase.
Right.
It really has a lot to do with the senior decision making, the leadership. What are the incentives that we put in place within a company and within the bigger ecosystem of companies interacting with each other, companies interacting with the society, and with the regulations, of course.
So you and I were talking about, we were using the Boeing Max example, and on NPR this morning there was a story about how, you know, a lot of people claimed they were telling management that they were putting production speed ahead of production quality, and that message wasn't being heard. Where did the responsibilities lie? What are the headwinds, the obstacles that companies face or that individuals face as they're developing new products, AI, airline, or anything else, that keep them from behaving keep them from creating the best ethical design?
Yeah. I really like the Boeing example because it's something that went wrong in so many layers. It also gives us an opportunity to show, yes, what can go wrong in creating an AI tool in whichever layer. So first part is that, of course, do people have the knowledge to create a good plane? For that, I would say we by now know pretty well how to make sure that we integrate ethics into the development, into the AI system itself. From the data choice, from the model choice, from the user interface design, all of these are choices we make, and we have ways of making sure that we make the best decision. Do every company know this? Not necessarily. So first of all, the first part that it diverges from Boeing is that, well, they knew, and they were trained in this. Well, we still have to train the companies. We still have to train the developers, the designers, and that's part of my job. This is one of the things that I do. The second layer is within the company, how do you integrate into the business decision making, into the leadership decision making? And I think that's very similar where we go to the Boeing story. If you think of a short-term gain, short-term benefit, things are not going to go well. Because in short-term benefit, you're going to think, let's just get this out, move fast and break things, as we know. But at some point, this is going to crumble, and you will have to go back and try to figure out where things went wrong to start with. And that is very resource intensive. Pulling a product is resource intensive, but trying to figure out what's in the data, what's in the model, that's also very resource intensive. Training a whole new model is very resource intensive. So there will be a lot of cost associated, but in addition to that, you will lose customer trust. There is going to be a reputational cost around these type of mistakes, as Boeing is experiencing right now. So for that, we need to train and equip the decision makers, the leadership, the senior managers, the C-suite, the boards. Oftentimes, developers and designers know way more than the boards about responsible AI. Again, this is one of the things that we are doing. We are doing executive education classes for that reason, so that we know what to add to the conversation. And I think in the end, there's one last piece, which is what is the ecosystem all of this sits into? What do investors care? So I work with World Economic Forum to write a guideline for investors. I believe it's going to come out in May, next month, to help them think about responsible AI risks and benefits as they invest, because investors do a lot of the incentive setting,
right,
and so do the regulators. And the last piece of this is the regulators. We have to have good regulation in place at the right time, not too soon, but also not too late.
So what are some of the specific risks that come with not being responsible about the creation of AI models and the implementation and deployment of them? What are some specific things that can go awry, that can cause harm?
So again, going back to some of the scandals that we've lived through, actually. So we know we already have a number of scandals in finance, in insurance, and in healthcare, where the risk assessment was done wrongly, that resulted in people losing opportunities or people losing lives. In criminal justice, similar situation. Risk assessments going wrong by tools that are just not done well. It's not only about, it's about ethics, but we shouldn't think about ethics just as an add-on. It is a tool when you are trying to make sure that you give the loan to someone who can pay back,
right,
and you discriminate. That also means that you're losing customers. You're losing people who could have paid back and who now don't have a choice, as well as you don't have that group of customers around. But it gets, of course, much more tragic if this happens when decisions go wrong in criminal justice and people go to jail, when decisions go wrong in healthcare system and people don't get the care they need. And these are, in a way, societal issues,
right,
but which also reflect in all of these companies selling these products, showing that they are not good in their jobs. They have not created the right product. They got the customers, the hospitals that these systems are employed, or the criminal justice system that these systems are employed, they got them in trouble. They got them in scandals. And that's not a company that you want to work with. So again, another work I do is I also work with Interpol, and one of the things that we write a toolkit for law enforcement's use of AI, responsible use of AI. And one of the things that we try to do is, well, we need to demand certain questions as the customer, especially organizational customer, as a hospital, as a police department, so that those who are delivering it, the companies who are building it, have an incentive, again, to build the good product.
So we talked about incentives, we talked about the risks of not producing responsible products, but still companies don't necessarily do it even when they have clear ethics guidelines.
Yeah.
Why is that?
I would say two reasons. One is the more charitable reason, which is that the way that companies went into this, and this is partially our fault,
right,
for having the wrong PR about ethics.
Right.
I think ethicists make it seem, oh, it's so complicated, you cannot possibly manage it, so it becomes this aspirational thing. So they have these companies, almost all companies publish their AI ethics guidelines and principles, but they are simply not applicable because they are not done in a way that's meant to be put into practice. So there was this gap between what it means to create principles, come up with principles, and actually how do you integrate into the design process. So let's call that like the lack of knowledge side portion of things. And then the other ones who know really well that this lack of knowledge can easily be handled. There are experts out there. And we can easily put these principles into practice. We can embed them into their workflow, into their AI lifecycle. They choose not to. And that choice is a business choice. And that brings me back to this ecosystem that we have. Investors, regulators, and where do you put the incentive to make sure those who know how to do it still don't go ahead and do it?
Is there an element, though, of this can't happen to me, this happened to this other company over here, but really we don't have that problem, and we just kind of get, as some commercials would have it, we get a little nose blind to what's around us?
I don't think so anymore.
Okay.
I think initially that was the idea. Initially, the tagline, "Don't be evil," was like, yeah, if you're not evil, whatever you produce is also not going to be evil.
Right.
I think by now we understand it's not about that. You can mask the gender, race from your data. You can tell the model not to use it. And if you don't check, it will still turn into a racist and sexist model.
Right.
So we know that it's not your intention. It's how you turn this intention into systems, structures, workflows, guidelines, safeguards, and really put it into action. And ethics have to run alongside of the life cycle. You don't get out of that, really, because ethical questions keep evolving, but they remain in the scene. As long as you have a tool, that tool can drift. As AI system can drift, AI system can start, it may start off well, but with the new data that it acquires and is trained on, it may now start making bad decisions. You have to make sure that you monitor the AI system and keep an eye on it. And AI systems don't make decisions by themselves, so you have to also make sure that the people who are using the AI system is trained to understand what is this tool doing? What are the strengths of this tool? What are the limitations? How do I disagree with what the tool recommends? Is there a way that allows me to disagree? Do I understand? And that is a user interface question. But also, am I in a position where I can make smart decisions using this tool? So all of these things matter as we go forward.
But you know, there's always these little catch points. And what are appropriate checks and balances? Are they regulatory? Are they internal to companies, and will companies really follow them? Do they have to be, do practices need to be fully integrated into the workflow? What are some of the checks and balances that make sense, that are viable, and that are effective?
Yeah, yes. So I think the most important thing to remember is that what we are trying to do in responsible AI is to put all these value decisions into the design of the AI system by making those choices, as I said, during data choice phases, during the model choice. Like all of these become, we call it ethics by design. So they turn into, the values turn into design choices and actions. So making sure that you have a workflow that integrates these choices is absolutely critical. Then the second important thing is, well, the workflow is not going to just implement itself by itself. You need to have people who are trained in different levels of responsibility. Our goal is never to turn everyone into an ethicist. I'm a philosopher. I spent 4 years doing my PhD, so I'm not going to do the same, put the same burden on everyone. Right. But what we want to make sure is that we have responsible AI respondents who can flag issues, and we have tools that they can use. We create tools that are customized for the company, and as questions get more complex, they can escalate it. So you build this organization structure where you have a lot of people in the development design phase who know enough to flag and use existing guidelines and tools, but then you have fewer people who can figure out when there's a trade-off, when there's an unclear situation. And you have a group of experts as well, either internal or external, who can really figure out the complex situation where it cannot be done through a guideline or a tool. So the workflow is one component. Having the organizational skill and the structure is the other component. And then the broader governance system with the playbook, meaning the guidelines and the tools, with the organizational structure being watched and really utilized, and with this process being monitored for every AI tool, every AI innovation to go through is the key. And it's not, like, one thing that I want to start emphasizing is that when I first started talking about these things, we are trying to do this.
Right.
Now we know how to do this. We just need developers, innovators, companies to really commit to it and see the business value and really start investing into responsible AI.
So as we build AI, what you're talking about are really closed systems. And as a journalist, I'm a bit more concerned about broad implications and the large language models. So when there's a lot of mis and disinformation on the internet. Yeah. Where just, some of it's by mistake, some of it's by intention. And in fact, I had a conversation with a doctor just the other day who was talking about a medical journal that is in fact propaganda. It looks like a real thing, it sounds like a real thing, but when you look into the text, you find intentional inaccuracies to support some specific advocacy point. So when we have large language models based on the internet, which is full of inaccuracies.
Yeah.
How do we as a society address that, deal with that? How do we teach ourselves to self-monitor maybe?
Yeah, this is an extremely difficult question. I mean, the problem is we couldn't get ourselves out of the misinformation, disinformation mess even before the large language models came in, and now large language models are just making it even harder and more difficult.
Correct.
And exactly the way that you described, we have this model that's not even meant to be factual, really. It's meant to be trained on whatever it is on the internet, and it's also meant to give you the probabilistic answer. It's not even giving you a factual answer. It's not like a search engine that's like listing the options. It's giving like, here's my best guess for the next word. It's absolutely not a search engine. And I think one part of this is how do we communicate this to the user?
Yes.
And I don't like putting the whole work on the user, on an individual user. I don't think we should buy the idea that, oh, let's educate the users, and that's where, because there are just so many things that we have to make decisions on. If we start just doing it ourselves, we are going to basically spend our day making good decisions but never getting anywhere.
Right.
So we have to start thinking, well, what is the best way that I can make sure that I use this tool correctly? And there, I think a lot of the work gets to the user interface design. So I think a very neglected part of responsible AI is about design and experience design. So how do we make sure that as a user, it's very apparent to me when I'm looking at the interface that this is not going to give me the facts. I may ask for facts. I may ask for sources. It may give me sources. They may be correct or not correct. I still have to go and check this.
Right.
And I need to see this. I don't need to keep this in the back of my head. It's not my responsibility to keep up with technology to this degree, especially when technology is growing in this way, but it is the responsibility of the designers to make my experience such that it's obvious to me.
So how do we hold them accountable? I'm thinking about, ChatGPT, Pilot. How do we hold those people accountable for the results that they provide that we're basing decisions on?
Yeah. Again, extremely complicated, especially given the world that we live in.
Yep.
One obvious, gatekeeper in some sense is the policymakers.
Right.
And we have like some very low-hanging fruits because, well, we need to first of all make sure that policymakers know what we are talking about. And oftentimes that's not even the situation. But then, of course, the other questions like, what do we exactly want the policy be like? What is the best? Because you don't want to slow down technology completely, because from ethical perspective, these are tools that are making our lives better.
Right.
So it's important that we support technology, but also make sure that we just put enough guardrails around it. And the other one is, again, I keep going back to the same thing, but it's really about the investment and where the finances flow that support these companies. Because even think about the incubator and accelerator setups, right? There are so many startups that come from incubators and accelerators are providing them with business help, legal help. Are they providing them with responsible AI help? No, they don't. And we can, again, not rocket science, something that we can easily embed. We cannot expect startups to have the funds and the resources to be able to do this, but we can expect incubators to do it. And once we put these systems in place where we have these resources available to small companies, startups, and bigger companies having a ideally mandate, where the policy is going towards anyway, then we can at least say that, okay, the resources are there. There are some incentives. Now, can we make sure that as investors invest, they also consider responsible AI as a serious business risk, and invest accordingly? And finally, I would say, of course, customer. But again, I don't think we have to rely on customers' choices. But if you can make better choices, do that.
Okay, so the bottom line is everybody has a responsibility here all along the line. And you're clearly speaking to an influential audience. So I hope everybody is thinking about this.
Thank you so much, Dr. Janja and Jane. Dr. Janja, you are AI's best PR for AI ethics.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being a part of our conference today. Thank you so much, Jane. Thank you. Big round of applause for these ladies.